thanks so much for being here. I can speak firsthand to how delighted you'll be for being here, because I've known Gillian for a while through another program that Sally is also involved in. And Gillian has her PhD in anthropology, and she was born in the UK. She moved to Australia about in her 20s, and then she left the academic life for an alternative lifestyle. And she's really manifested a beautiful lifestyle. She lives on 40 acres of land, and she is in her temple that she built on her land as to offer this presentation. Gillian is a yoga teacher, a shiatsu. She also does that, and being in her presence is just meditative in and of itself. But if you ever want to get to a deep space, meditate with Gillian. And I can speak firsthand for her yoga as well. She has a wonderful CD called The Art of Relaxation, right? The Art of, is that the right name, Gillian? You're muted. You're muted. I should know. I could pull it right up on my phone, I'll tell you. And
yes.
That's okay. And you can order it on Apple, and it's a wonderful way, beautiful, relaxing music. No?
Well,
you can't?
if you're putting a plug in for my CDs, that's lovely. Go into my website, www.drgillianross.com. You'll find a number of the CDs there and practices, some of them free downloads, others you order, and order them through me.
And this is, order through you instead. Okay. And
actually,
so
yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, you can get it one way or the other. I found,
yeah.
And the Yoga Nidra is a beautiful habit to get into listening to in the middle of your day when you might need a nap or right before bed. And Gillian also, she's a writer, and her latest book, which is also worth the read, is Catastrophe, consciousness versus catastrophe.
That's right.
So welcome, Gillian.
Becoming more relevant by the day. Yes, yes. Basically what my talk is about, really. You could call it that. Yes. Thank you so much, Bridget, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm aware of the wonderful work that your centre and your community does to help raise the level of human consciousness at this pivotal make or break time in human history. And so I was really delighted when Bridget invited me to be with you. And I'm also very delighted that she's given me 2 hours with you, which I sort of requested, but it does seem a long time. But it does include about an hour. After about an hour, we will do a 20-minute meditation. So I hope we'll stay with you, and we'll also have time for questions and discussion at the end. So it's a great pleasure to be with you. So just taking a deep breath, I want first to acknowledge our First Nations people across the planet, in particular the Wujibal people of northern New South Wales, where I live. As Bridget mentioned, I'm very blessed to be on 40 acres of land adjacent to an ancient Aboriginal initiation site. So I'm very, very conscious of the power of the ancestral energies here and the land energies. And I often sit here on my temple deck and reflect with awe on the way of life that was led here for so many tens of thousands of years before Western civilization so brutally intruded a mere 200 years ago, 200 or so. So yes, and it's also humbling to reflect on the fact that Homo sapiens has been around for 250, 300,000 years, something extraordinary time. And it's only in the last 12,000 years that we've brought forth something we call civilization. And in that 12,000 years, we've had civilizations rising and falling across planet Earth, mostly self-destructing through ecological degradation, through warfare, through social inequity, as well as, of course, climate impacts and the like. So it has been said that the arc of history is long but bends towards justice, which may still be true. But I think we can say from the last 12,000 years that the arc of civilization is short and bends towards collapse. And there's no reason for us to believe that Western civilization is no different in that regard. On the contrary, it is manifesting, it's now global culture for a start, and more powerfully destructive than any of its predecessors. We just have to look at the Hurricane Ian these last few weeks. The devastation caused by that is a reminder of just how tragically fragile we are before the forces of nature that our way of life is causing. And of course, climate change is not the only problem. We're beset with other crises as well. In short, we could say that I think we can say, I'm going to boldly say, that the industrial growth society, with its toxic masculinity, because all these civilizations have been patriarchal, and its corporate greed and so on and so forth, is dying. We can no longer with confidence say that there's going to be business as usual, nor should we. Now, some of you I know are familiar with the work of Joanna Macy, extraordinary woman in her 90s now. Any response from anyone on that? Hands raised. Joanna Macy, yes. The work that reconnects, yes, beautiful. And she's a scientist, of course. She's a Buddhist scholar. She's been an environmental activist all her life, and she's a mystic. She translates the mystical poetry of Rainer Maria Rilke. Now she describes our current situation as we are in the great unraveling. The great unraveling. I think that's a very appropriate way of describing our current status of our civilization, the great unraveling. But it's not all gloom and doom, beloveds, because this great unraveling could be indicating a transition to a very different way of life for humanity, a way of life beyond patriarchy, beyond civilizations, beyond empire building and nation states and so on. The transition to a way of life which Charles Eisenstein describes as the beautiful world our hearts know is possible. And Joanna calls this transition time the great turning. And I think that's another lovely way of describing it, the great turning. But clearly it requires a radical shift in our worldview and our values. In short, it requires nothing less than a revolution in consciousness. Some of you I know will be familiar with the work of Cynthia Bourgeault, contemporary Christian mystic. And she says that expecting to resolve our current crises from the current level of our collective consciousness is like trying to learn to play the violin with a saw. I think that's very apt indeed. And of course, it echoes Einstein's famous quote that we cannot solve complex problems from the same level of consciousness that created them. We are being drawn into the necessity for this great turning, this transition in consciousness. And it is clearly true that human consciousness, and this is an awesome fact to absorb, that human consciousness is now the driving force of evolution or devolution on planet Earth. The destiny of planet Earth is in the hands of human consciousness. That's both scary and awesome, and underlines our need for a revolution in consciousness. We have already created what Teilhard de Chardin envisaged as the noosphere, a sphere of mind, of consciousness, of ideas circling the planet, interconnected around the planet, which has just as much power to influence the future of our Mother Earth as did the emergence of the lithosphere, the oceans, so many billions years ago, and the emergence of the atmosphere and the emergence of the biosphere. Now we have the noosphere. The problem is that this nascent noosphere, the noosphere in its infancy. Oh, and it's just an interesting point there. I listened to Brian Swin talking the other day. I'm sure you're aware of Brian Swin, a student of Teilhard de Chardin and Thomas Berry. saying that the James Webb telescope has been created by the noosphere. So we have this technosphere birthing this noosphere, this sphere of consciousness that is influencing our destiny. But the problem is that this noosphere, this emerging noosphere, is currently dominated by, controlled by, woven with, one might say, the separate self, humanity's egoic consciousness. Now, the separate self, I'm calling it the ego consciousness, has crept up on us over the last several thousand years, culminating, might one say, in an epidemic of narcissism in our modern era. Even our spiritual endeavors have been hijacked by it. I hear so much this emphasis on my enlightenment, my well-being, you know, my spiritual awakening, etc., what I call the I, me, mine syndrome of our time. So this separate egoic consciousness has curiously separated us from our connection with the natural world, which we have then objectified. It's separated us from each other, and it's separated us from our own inner depths. It has externalized us. We're living on the surface of existence in so many ways. Now, it can be said that this ego, I might say it also tragically diminished our capacity for love. Now, we might say that this ego is needed to birth the scientific revolution and the technosphere and even the noosphere. But it has demonstrated a very masculine bias. And although it might have advanced us scientifically and technologically, it has left us very stultified emotionally and spiritually, traumatized emotionally and stultified spiritually. I came across a quote from Einstein in that regard recently, where he said, all our exalted technological progress is comparable to an axe being placed in the hands of a pathological criminal. That's from Einstein a while ago. Or before he died, of course. So, my dears, the great turning that we hope will be following the great unraveling requires us to reweave the fabric of the noosphere with a new consciousness fired hopefully by the energy of love. And the good news is that this new consciousness is already emerging. And we see this, of course, in our gathering today and in the work of the Well, and many other groups of people across the planet are bringing forth a new consciousness for humanity. I'm calling this new worldview a Holy Trinity consciousness, one that will heal the wounds and traumas of separation. It's a consciousness that requires us to reclaim our birthright as animists and as mystics, while also honoring and integrating and indeed being inspired by and helped by 21st century science and technology. A Holy Trinity consciousness of animism, mysticism, and science. That's a bit of a mouthful, so I call it the HTC, our Holy Trinity consciousness. Now, HTC sounds a bit like a medical diagnosis, but of course it's the exact opposite of that. It's a prophylactic, it's an antidote to things like PTSD, deep depression, and all the many things that we're seeing manifesting. Addictions, of course, all our addictions that are manifesting in our modern era and requiring us to switch to this new level of consciousness. And let us be clear that it's no small matter. It's not just a matter of understanding the need to become animists and mystics and honoring science and so on in our heads, in our intellect. We have to embody this new consciousness. It has to bring forth new neuronal connections in our brain, in our nervous system. And neuronal science, of course, is already indicating through brain scans how meditation can change the activities of the neurons of the brain. So the embodiment is a big deal. And this is what the few of us have to focus on to shift humanity's consciousness into this new level of being. It will even require, I think, a new way of thinking and listening, of speaking. It thrives on the language of poetry, rather than the more rigid conceptual thinking of rational mental consciousness, which tends to lock us into our separate self. We've greatly overestimated, I think, the power of thinking. Descartes certainly got it wrong when he said, "I think, therefore I am." It's much more true to say that I am when I don't think. And I like to share a joke around Descartes on that one, that he was invited to a cocktail party and asked if he'd like a glass of champagne. And he replied, "I think not," and disappeared. The other recall I have on this thinking thing is Eckhart Tolle. A few years ago, I heard an interview with him where he was asked, "What is the greatest gift that your spiritual awakening has given to you?" And after a typical Eckhart pause, he said, "I can choose not to think." I was very impressed with that. I can choose not to think. So, in order to convey something of the richness and the survival imperative of this HTC, I will be speaking of it through images and poetry and inspirational quotations from wise beings, past and present, who have already embodied it. They've already got it into their nervous system. To attempt to do justice to this consciousness in the language of everyday prose would be like learning to play the violin with a saw. But before we do that, before we move into poetic mode, I'd like you to understand that culturally speaking, worldviews do not just drop from the sky. They emerge from previous ones. And we clearly see this in our emerging noosphere. I mean, for example, you know, the James Webb Telescope, which Brian Swim described as being created by the noosphere, was a product of a collective mind coming from at least 14 different countries, combined their knowledge, their scientific wisdom, and so on to create it. So we're building always, it's the genius of humanity, really. That's been the way we've evolved our civilizations, is that each generation of knowledge builds on previous generations because of our gift of symbolic language, one might say, to a large extent. But bear with me first as I use mundane prose to give you a very brief historical overview of the dominant worldviews that humanity has moved through. And I'm going to do that with the help of diagrams from cultural historian Richard Tarnas. He's a colleague of Brian Swim at the Institute of Integral Studies in California. Interesting, very interesting guy. And it will become clear to you, I hope, that our new level of consciousness arises in no small measure from harvesting the best of previous ones. So we have our diagrams. Here we go. I hope you can see those. Now I want to make clear that we're not looking at any notion of progression here. Development, perhaps, yes, but that is not the same as progress. The narrative of endless progress for Homo sapiens has been seriously undermined, perhaps in recent times. And I diverge from Ken Wilber on that, for those of you who are familiar with his work. I mean, Brian Swim was saying in this talk the other day that the James Webb Telescope has revealed at least 200 million Earth-like planets in our Milky Way galaxy alone. That is phenomenal. And it's humbling, and it makes us realize that, you know, what's happening here on our Mother Earth could be just one of many experiments through the universe. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to move through our great turning and onto an enlightened noosphere. But this is why each one of us has a part to play in hoping that does in fact happen. So let's look at the primal worldview. In the primal worldview, the diagram on the left, the shaded area, the soul, pervades all of nature and the cosmos, a permeable human self directly participating in a larger matrix of meaning and purpose in which it is embodied. The primal cosmos was universally experienced for countless millennia as tangibly alive, pervasively intentional and responsive, animated by archetypal beings and forces. And indeed, it is such a blessing that primal consciousness still exists among our indigenous brothers and sisters, and of course our poets and many others in our so-called civilization. Humanity as a whole needs to reawaken our animistic sensibilities in our great turning and embody the soul of our Mother Earth, the anima mundi, the soul of Gaia. It is the animistic dimension of our new consciousness. So moving on to diagram 2, that sacred, enchanted, holistic cosmos was gradually dismantled across the planet. We experienced the rise of patriarchy and the dogma of religious institutions. The human self was put center stage, but in a unique relationship to a transcendent divinity, a God in heaven, separate from and having sovereignty over the created world. The natural world came to be seen as being fallen, corrupt, devoid of meaning and purpose, other than the way in which it can be used, of course, by humans. And we could say that that, of course, has involved a repression of the feminine across all the emerging patriarchies, but especially, I think, in Western civilization, and that's another story. So moving to worldview 3, in the West particularly, it was through that extraordinary shift in vision that they developed a foundation for the rapid ascent of modern science and an industrial civilization in which competitive individualism reigned supreme. The privileged position of the human vis-a-vis the rest of creation was assumed and expanded in entirely secular terms. God became a fox of heaven, forever pursued by human hands. The worldview gave rise to Cartesian dualism, the mind and matter split. Descartes, is said to torture animals in his lectures to demonstrate to his students that their squealing was simply the squealing of a machine. Can you imagine that? And of course, Cartesian dualism turned out to be the foundation stone of our modern era. Tarnas also offers a third diagram, which I haven't included, which he calls the late modern or postmodern worldview, where things get a lot worse. The sense of self has become increasingly alienated from a universe devoid of meaning. We're not even the center anymore, we're occupying the periphery somewhere. We could call our HTC, our Holy Trinity consciousness, as postmodern, or perhaps we could call it integral, because it integrates previous worldviews, harvesting the truths that each offer while recognizing and rejecting their shadow aspects. And that's not so difficult, given that all three worldviews, of course, still exist individually and collectively. The primal worldview, as I've already intimated, is embodied in our indigenous brothers and sisters. And we're seeing it being honored in a sort of animistic, shamanistic revival. And the traditional worldview gave us not just religious institutions, institutionalized religion with its dogma, its rigidity, but a mystical tradition, especially in the East. It wasn't just about patriarchal repression, etc. It gave us that transcendent focus, which nurtured a monastic tradition and a tradition of mysticism. You see, in all our great, institutionalized religious worldviews, the existence of the most remarkable mystics who have experienced that direct mystical connection with that transcendent other. And here's the thing, the desacralization, it's a big word, taking the sacred out of nature, which we did in our modern worldview, gave rise to, of course, the scientific revolution and birthed the modern era. It alienated us from both our animistic roots and our potential for mystical experience, but it ended up giving us an understanding of matter and the cosmos that actually inspires and validates a whole new world view, a new panentheism. Panentheism is the philosophy which sees the sacred in both the created world and beyond the created world. This traditional panentheism, which we are reviving, is beautifully expressed for us in the famous words from Lakota medicine man, Black Elk. There we have Black Elk. All things are the works of the Great Spirit. We should know that he, she, is within all things, the trees, the rivers, the mountains, all the four-legged animals and the winged peoples. I love that, the winged peoples. And even more important, we should understand that he, she is also above all these things and peoples. 21st century science has given us a vitalized panentheism, a new experience of reality, a new experience of the sacred in nature. It has given us panentheism on steroids, I like to say. So if we could have the next slide coming up. Here we have an image, a charming image of Maria Mitchell, who is said to be the first female astronomer living in the early 20th, late 19th century. And we have a lovely quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, bless him, which more or less initiates us into our HTC. If we can marry the knowledge of the outer sciences with the knowledge and practice of the inner sciences of mystical progress, the entire future of the human race can be transformed. And then, of course, there is the famous quote from Einstein, science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind. And I came across a nice quote from Thich Nhat Hanh recently, the beautiful Thich Nhat Hanh, of course, died recently. Every scientific advance deepens our admiration for Mother Earth. So, science has moved a long way from the rigidity of Newtonian physics and Darwinian biology in a mechanistic universe. Although, of course, many scientists are still stuck there. Blake pleaded, God save us from single vision and Newton's sleep. Well, it seems that God did. He or she did. Far from putting us to sleep, science has come to reveal many of the truths bequeathed to us by mystics. As Brian says, I love this from Brian. Again, I came across this the other day in an interview he did with Rick Archer on a platform called Bat Gap, Buddha at the gas pump, abbreviated Bat Gap. And it's a lovely interview with Brian there. And he says there, science does not explain away mystery, it deepens it. Mid-20th century science entered its wisdom, 21st century science entered its wisdom phase. It started to dissolve what's been called the fallacy of concretization, bringing us into an Alice in Wonderland world of quantum weirdness, and with the Hubble and Webb telescopes bringing images of a universe saturated with beauty and humbling us with the vastness of our cosmic home. You know, it's said that when the James Webb telescope succeeded and the first images came through, many of the scientists at NASA actually wept. And we're seeing so much inspiration from biology these days, telling us that even cockroaches have personality. And I read a book recently on the intelligence of birds, which is so awesome. The pejorative term bird brain is now so inappropriate. So, my dears, perhaps the most precious consciousness-raising gift from science is the way in which it has awakened profound feelings of awe. Here we have some lovely awe quotes. And a quote from our lovely astronomer lady. I love this one. Mingle, she used to say this to her students. Mingle the starlight with your lives and you won't be fretted by trifles. Isn't that beautiful? And of course, from Joanna Macy, to be alive in this beautiful self-organizing universe is to participate in the dance of life is a wonder beyond words. And you know, the self-organizing universe, that's one of the great mystic keys that science has given us, this understanding that this universe has the capacity to self-organize. Well, what is going on there? Other than the assumption of reasonable deduction, there's an intelligence working there. And a lovely one, sweet one from Mary Oliver. Let me keep company always with those who say, look and laugh in astonishment and bow their heads. I came across a rabbi talking some time ago where he was asked why we don't believe in God anymore or something. He said, we don't bow low enough anymore. We don't have the humility to bow low enough. And then we have this favorite quote of mine from Brian. You take hydrogen gas, you leave it alone for 14 billion years, and it turns into rose bushes, giraffes, and humans. We're back there to the self-organizing universe. How can that happen? I came across that quote from Brian back in the 90s when I was watching his video series, Canticle to the Cosmos, and of course fell madly in love with him. It was such an awakening series for me because it began to reconcile what had been my mystical experience and mystical understanding with my admiration for science. And what could be more awesome with that image than the actual image of the Earth, which we photographed from outer space back in the late 70s. And I thought and hoped then that maybe this was a great turning for humanity, a new vision of us uniting vision. But it didn't happen back then, not least because we didn't have a uniting creation story. And our cultures need creation stories. We've always brought forth creation stories, but we're short of a uniting one. And it has been said that the greatest discovery of the scientific enterprise is cosmogenesis, cosmic evolution, not least because it has given us a new globally uniting creation story. Here we have an image of the Andromeda galaxy from the Hubble telescope. The understanding that the destiny of the world is determined less by battles that are lost and won, by the stories it loves and believes in. And another, an inspiring one from Brian. It is impossible for us to conceive of what we might become. There's our HTC coming in. Once we truly realize ourselves as a mode of the whole universe and draw freely from the ocean of energy, which is its sublime consciousness. We just have to breathe sentience and sacredness into science's Big Bang discovery of the universe. And we can now say that the universe is a vast, interconnected, evolving, endlessly creative, purposeful, numinous reality, sacred, divine reality. And every atom, every living being is an utterly sacred manifestation of a sublime, transcendent consciousness. I tend to use the word God because it has too much patriarchal baggage, but you could say God. In other words, we end up rebirthing our primary worldview, but on steroids. Our new story has revealed us to be the children of the universe, the offspring of exploding stars. As Brian puts it, we are the rocks dancing. Isn't that lovely? The rocks dancing, the latest geological formations of a biospiritual planet. Understanding that, how can we not embrace our kinship with all life on Earth? We begin to heal the wounds of separation. I love that image of the child hugging tree. And we have an inspiration quote from Sufi master Llewellyn Vaughan Lee, contemporary master of Sufism. The world is part of our own self, and we are part of its suffering wholeness. Only from the place of sacred wholeness and reverence can we begin the work of healing, of bringing the world back into balance. In other words, of reweaving the noosphere. And then we have one from Thomas Berry, Brian Swinn's mentor. Since the Industrial Revolution, the human mind has been placed within the narrowest confines it has experienced since consciousness emerged from the Stone Age. He goes on to say, we are talking only to ourselves. We're not talking to the rivers. We're not listening to the wind. Most of the disasters that are happening now are a consequence of that spiritual autism. And more on the shadow side of our modern era, and of course it has a massive shadow side, I found this quote from the novelist D.H. Lawrence, writing, of course, in the early 20th century. You might like to close your eyes to listen to this one. Oh, what a catastrophe for man when he cut himself off from his union with the sun and the earth. This is what is the matter with us. We are bleeding at the roots because we're cut off from the earth and the sun and the stars, and love has become a grinning mockery because, poor blossom, we plucked it from its stem on the tree of life and expected it to keep blossoming in our civilized vase on the table. I did mention earlier that one of the great tragedies of our separate self-ego is it's diminished our capacity for love. And here we have a tree image, of course. We have to have that for our animistic revival. And a quote from Rilke: "If we surrendered to Earth's intelligence, we could rise uprooted like trees." The tree image is such a powerful one for the emergence of our HTC and our reweaving of the noosphere, because it gives us, look at those roots, the roots into the ground. We're now understanding that the trees communicate with one another through their roots in the most amazing way. So it's emphasizing our need for groundedness, for our animistic, living, feeling connection with the earth. But then it also has this magnificent canopy that reaches out to the stars, to the sky, to the sun, which symbolizes the need for our connection with the transcendent, our mystical revival. Now, you may not have heard of David Abraham. The quote from him: he's a naturalist and a very sensitive HTC realized naturalist. There's a lovely conversation with him and Charles Einstein on YouTube that I'd recommend. He says, sentience, stresses that sentience was never our private possession. We live immersed in intelligence, enveloped and informed by a creativity we cannot fathom. We're back to that absurdity of Descartes, where he didn't see the animals as having sentience and could be tortured without pain. And from the lovely Thich Nhat Hanh, what we need most is to hear within ourselves the sound of the earth crying. Because with allowing ourselves to grieve, we also awaken our capacity for love. One of the most shocking aspects of our modern time and our separate ego is the way we treat our animals. Factory farming. I have this quote from Martin Luther King: "One day the absurdity of the almost universal belief in the slavery of animals will be palpable. We shall have discovered our souls and become worthy of sharing this planet with them." In other words, we have discovered our innate animism. I have a dream. Sadly, very much that is still a dream. We are still witnessing what has been described as the eternal Treblinka of factory farming. Now here, a little pause where before we go into our mystical renaissance, I would like to, or suggest that you close your eyes, because what I'm about to share with you now is so critical to the reweaving of our noosphere. It is a foundation of our new consciousness. We are the universe reflecting upon itself. The transcendent intelligence that birthed our universe is at this time in history becoming aware of itself through the consciousness of the human. This is awesome. It's a realization gifted to us by our 21st century science. The divine intelligence that is orchestrating the whole drama of cosmic evolution, cosmogenesis, is yearning to express itself through our thoughts and our actions. It is our destiny to allow this sublime intelligence to work through us consciously and creatively and collectively. So we can say, not my will, my little ego will, but thy will, capital T, capital W, be done. I think it is the mantra of our time. It also reminds me of the understanding in ancient Chinese Taoism where they say that liberation comes when you can flow in the current of the eternal Tao. Tao, of course, being that intelligence of the universe. This has to be the realization as we seed the great turning. It is a realization that awakens both our primal animism and our birthright as mystics. Mysticism is no longer the prerogative of the saint or the sage or the strange person. We are all mystics at heart, all capable of experiencing and living the transforming power of a sense of connection with our transcendent divine source, with God, if you like. And it is a connection that is such a critical ingredient of the great turning. And we saw, and I spoke of it being actually emerging during that second worldview, where we had emergence of a connection with a God beyond the universe. I promised you poetry. You might like to open your eyes now. I love to share this one from the Sufi mystic poet Hafiz. It is such a wonderful metaphor for mystic meditation, which we're going to do shortly. How did the rose ever open its heart and give to this world all of her beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. Otherwise, we all remain too frightened. Mystic meditation is very different from mindfulness meditation. It is done in a spirit of devotion, surrendering to the intelligence of something far greater than our little ego, connecting with our divine source, experienced by our soul's divine beloved, imaged or simply experienced as the everlasting light of awareness. The mystics of all times and places have tasted the mystery that is this everlasting light. They say it is the consciousness of love, the love that passeth all understanding. Everything in the universe is bringing forth in a unique way the uncreated light that is both its source, sustenance, and substance. If only every one of us on the planet could even fleetingly experience this inner light, it would be a very different world. And I believe that that is the promise of our new Holy Trinity consciousness. We have here some quotes inspiring our mystical renaissance. From the Dalai Lama, no less, the aim of life is to embody the transcendent. That's what we're talking about in our mystical renaissance. And from Joseph Campbell, I'm sure you're familiar with his work back in the late 20th century. Wonderful, wonderful guy. We are participating in one of the greatest leaps of the human spirit to a knowledge not only of outside nature, but also of our own deep inward mystery. And from Otto Rank, an interesting one, psychologist, mid-20th century, famed for his book on schizophrenia called The Divided Self, in which he said that schizophrenics and mystics find themselves in the same ocean. It's just that the mystics have learnt to swim. And he here says, a civilization that excludes the mystic is inviting neuroses on a large scale. And we can certainly say amen to that. And this stunning one from Jean Houston. You may know Jean Houston. Many, many years, well, one of the founding mothers of the human potential movement back in the 1970s, still alive and well, formidable lady. And I've been told that my internet connection is unstable, but I shall ignore that. Saying phenomenally, at this time in our history, the greatest accelerator of evolution is mystical experience. Forget artificial intelligence and quantum computers. The greatest accelerator of human evolution is mystical experience, is mysticism. How about that? And here we are with some more quotes on mysticism and how we ignore it at our peril. Ken Wilber, the nightmare of history is the nightmare of the Atman Project, the fruitless search in time for that which is finally timeless. The Atman Project is the searching for the true self outside ourselves, for searching for a sense of belonging, of wholeness outside ourselves through, of course, an epidemic of addiction. And this beautiful one from Father Wayne Teasdale from his book on universal mysticism called The Mystic Heart, where he says, echoing Jean Houston here, mysticism is the most precious gift given to humanity and the most powerful resource for transforming our lives. That's strong stuff. And then from Thich Nhat Hanh, the greatest relief we can obtain, the relief from our suffering, is available when we touch the ultimate. I'm reminded here of a favorite quote of mine from Carl Jung, who of course dealt with or attempted to heal countless numbers of neuroses with people during his life. He ended up saying, the approach to the numinous is the real therapy. Insomuch as you attain to the numinous experience, that is experience of God, you are released from the curse of pathology. And here we have, beloveds, a quotation that sums up our great turning, gifted to us by Sri Aurobindo from his epic poem Savriti, 20th century evolutionary mystic Sri Aurobindo. So I invite you again to close your eyes again and absorb this poem in your marrow bone as I read it. And after that, I will lead you into a 20-minute meditation practice, which I'm sure you're all very ready for. And after that, very briefly, we'll touch upon some of the exquisite qualities of consciousness that spontaneously arise and flourish with the blossoming of our new HTC. So this poem from Sri Aurobindo is really summarizing what is understood in the East, in the esoteric tantric tradition, as a union of the divine feminine in creation with the transcendent masculine. And in tantric yoga, this is actually experienced in the body as a rising of what we now understand in a popular sense as Kundalini energy, rising through our body, through the central channel, through the chakras, purifying us, moving out through the top of the head, uniting with the everlasting light above, and then the marriage of that union, the energy of that marriage is brought down into the body, centering in the heart, in a new whole body consciousness. And this is the tantric summation of that, really, in this verse from Sri Aurobindo. Then shall be ended here on earth the law of pain. Earth shall be made a home of heaven's light. The spirit's tops and nature's base shall draw near to the secret of their separate truth and know each other as one deity. Then spirit shall look out through matter's gaze, and matter shall reveal the spirit's face. I'm sure you'll appreciate what a beautiful summation that is of the promise of our great turning and our HTC. So, beloveds, I'm going to invite you now to take up a meditation posture. Sitting ideally with both feet flat on the floor, don't have your legs crossed. And ideally your spine free of the back of the chair. Allow energies to circulate around your spine. Importantly, the back of your neck aligned with your spine. Don't have your chin dropping on your chest or thrust up to the sky. Take a few deep breaths in. Soften your whole body with your relaxation. Soften your whole body with your out breath. We're going to begin our meditation practice with some guidance into the space of the third eye. The third eye is a channel of energy, subtle energy running from between the eyebrows through to the center of the head and out through the back. And it's been understood in traditional esoteric understanding, wisdom, that it is the gateway, the portal to our inner being, to our experience of inner realms, and of course to the experience of a connection with the transcendent. So the technique I have learned for helping to awaken this third eye, which of course does naturally awaken through meditation practice, but we can accelerate that opening. We do it from the throat chakra. So I'm going to invite you to take your awareness to your throat, to your larynx, and just feel the movement of your breath there. The breath can come in through the nose or the mouth, it doesn't matter, but you're going to draw it in from your throat. Feeling a vibration in your throat. It will make a hissing noise as you breathe in and a hissing noise as you breathe out. So I invite you, if you can, just to practice this throat breathing, as we call it, throat breathing. Total focus of awareness, total concentration on the movement of breath through the larynx. Basically awakening your throat chakra. Keeping your vertical posture as you do it, it helps the process. Feeling the back of your neck aligned with your spine. You begin to observe how your vertical posture and throat breathing very quickly begins to calm your mind. Your awareness in the larynx, become aware between the eyebrows. Awareness in between the eyebrows. Don't try to grasp the area with too tight a focus, or the process can't unfold. Gentle awareness of the area between your eyebrows. Flow with the experience. Flow with whatever spontaneously arises. If the breath naturally changes and becomes more intense, then allow it to do so. But make sure that you maintain your friction breathing. Remain aware in the middle of the eyebrows, breathing with your throat friction. Keep your eyes closed. Keep breathing with throat friction and hold your awareness between your eyebrows. If the experience becomes too intense for you, all you have to do is open your eyes and you will be brought back to normal consciousness. Remain with your eyes closed, breathing with the friction in the throat, awareness between the eyebrows. Start looking for a vibration in between the eyebrows. This can take different forms, either a clear vibration or a tingling, or even just a rather blurry pressure or weight or feeling of density in between the eyebrows. Don't try too hard to feel anything. Remain vacant and just allow things to happen. Keep your eyes closed and continue breathing with throat friction, holding your awareness between your eyebrows. As soon as the faintest feeling of vibration or tingling or pressure or density is perceived between the eyebrows, begin to connect the feeling, whatever it is, with the friction in the throat. Connecting means being aware of the friction in the throat and the vibration between the eyebrows at the same time. They seem to resonate with one another. If you are experiencing vibration or tingling in some other part of your body, for example in your arms, pay no attention to it. Just remain aware of the vibration or density or pressure between your eyebrows and connect it with the friction in your throat. No visualization, no imagining, just flow with what comes. Awareness between the eyebrows, awareness in the throat. Connect the vibration between the eyebrows with the vibration in the larynx. And now stop breathing with the friction in the throat. Do not focus on the vibration anymore. Just remain with your eyes closed
and aware in the space between the eyebrows. Be extremely motionless. Experience a certain quality of absolute stillness. In that motionlessness, you can tune in to the energy around you. Observe if any feeling of light or colour can be perceived in between the eyebrows. And now, connect your third eye with your heart energy. Awareness in the eye, awareness in your heart center, in the center of your chest. If necessary, heighten the connection with some friction breathing. The heart-eye connection can be profoundly transforming. Rest in your heart.
Now, beloveds, staying with your heart-eye connection, but visualize way above your head the source of golden light, like a golden sun, shining warm, healing light down into you. You may like to see it is flowing from the heart and outstretched hands of the Divine Mother, in whatever way she chooses, you choose to visualize her. She is holding you in the exquisite light of her divine essence, pouring her love into you. Feel the light from above entering your body through the top of your head, nourishing your brain cells, giving you a golden brain. See it, feel it flowing into your face, your eyes, your jaw, kissing open your third eye. Feel the tingling there. The light flows through your throat and across your shoulders, releasing tension in your neck and shoulders. Feel it flowing down both arms filled with the golden light, lighting up your fingertips. Feel her energy flowing into your chest, nourishing, rejuvenating your heart and your lungs. And the nourishing golden light flowing down from above quickens and opens your heart center, becomes like a golden sun in the center of your chest, awakening feelings of tenderness and gratitude. Feel your heart softening with the light flowing down into your heart from above. And now feel it flowing down into your belly, softening and releasing all tension there. As your belly fills with this warm mother's healing energy, she brings a feeling of groundedness, a fullness of being. Feel the light radiating down into your lower back, around your lower back and down into your legs, flowing through your legs and lighting up your toes. Your whole body is becoming bathed, every cell nourished with her light and her love. You have become a vessel of the mother's light. Now rest your awareness again on your heart center. Become aware of your breathing. Letting go of your throat breathing now. Just become aware of your relaxed breathing. With every breath, feel you are drawing the golden light from above into your heart center through the top of your head. With each in-breath, your heart chakra is opening to receive the exquisite tenderness of the Divine Mother's light and love. You might feel that center becoming warm and the tension around your heart thawing. Maybe feeling a little pain there, that's a good sign. And now with every exhalation, each out-breath, radiate her light into the world. Breathing in the light from above to your heart, breathing out the light and love into the world. Receiving, giving. Receiving, giving. The rhythm of your breath and the heartbeat of creation. O love, O pure deep love, be here, be now. Make us your servant, your breath. May we learn to use the interior palate of our heart to taste how sweet it is to live as love. I invite you now to open your eyes. Just take a moment to register how you feel. And in particular, how you feel your sense of self to be. See if your sense of self feels different. One of the great gifts of our great turning into our new consciousness is the transcending of our ego. So we're looking now at the fruits of the Trinity. In this transition time, those of us who are privileged enough to be seeding the consciousness of the great turning become more and more aware of ourselves as being two selves, one that reacts and one that responds. The ego self, the false self, and the new self. In our HTC, we are being initiated into a new sense of self, a new identity that transcends our separate little ego self. And again, this is embodied. This is our new neuronal connections that are replacing the old ego ones. It's been given many names. Some people call it the authentic self. the true self, the higher self, the Joanna speaks of the Gaia self. They're all slightly different meanings, but they're all talking about the self beyond ego, because it does have many different stages of evolution. I like to call it the snowflake self, because just as a snowflake is a gorgeous, unique crystallization of water, so each one of us in our divine essence is a unique crystallization of the infinite. The snowflake self always also conveys the feeling of impermanence, of instability, because at this stage in our, nascent noosphere time and in our great turning, that self very easily contracts back into ego self, the alternative neuronal roots in our body, which Matthew Fox sees as being connected very much to the reptilian mind, the the flight or flee mechanism of the reptilian mind. So I rather like snowflake self, and I will call it that. So in our snowflake self, we can say, even the quote from Thomas Merton, if we look now at our quotations for our transcending ego, even if Thomas Merton, of course, was a great Christian mystic, even if man flies all over the universe, he's still nothing but a flying ant until he recovers a human center and a human spirit in the depth of his own being. And I came across a lovely quote from Father Richard Rohr the other day. I receive, I'm so sure some of you do, his daily meditations from the Center of Contemplation and Action. He wrote, "I think the only and single purpose of religion is to lead us to an experience of the true self. Every sacrament, every song, every bit of priesthood, ceremony, or liturgy, as far as I'm concerned, is to allow us to experience our true self, and I say our snowflake self, who we are in God and who God is in us." So there's Father Richard Rohr very clearly echoing us here. And of course, on Campbell, I remember saying that the greatest privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. And of course, we have this famous quote from Hamlet, Shakespeare, "To thine own self be true, and it follows as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man." And I was listening to an interview with the poet David White the other day from Krista Tippett on her On Being program's site. And she asked him, "How would you define a human being?" And I thought his response was very profound. After a pause, he said, "We are the only species on the planet who can choose to be who we are not." Ponder on that, that's very profound. All our defense mechanisms, all our masks, all our addictive personalities and so on. We are choosing to be who we are not. Time in our great turning to be who we are, who we truly are. And I just love this quote from Hafiz. "I am a hole in the flute that the Christ's breath moves through. Listen to this music." We're back to our mantra, not my little will, but thy will be done. I couldn't spend another hour listing the many differences between the ego and the sacred self, but I'm sure you know, all of you, sufficiently in our great turning to appreciate these differences and to know this is the thing with the meditation practice. You begin to be aware when you're in one as opposed to the other. I especially feel that when I go down and be with the family, I hear myself being triggered into old patterns of reaction. And think, "Oh no, you can't go there, Gillian, you don't have to go there anymore." Switch yourself back into the snowflake self. But one of the most distinctive signatures of the HTC is an awakened heart. So we have a lovely poem from Hildegard of Bingen here to help us perfume that. Instead of listing differences, let's just rest our hearts in this beautiful invitation from Christian mystic Hildegard of Bingen to savor the richness of our emerging HTC. And you know, the Hindu sage Ramana said to his disciples that enlightenment is when you can rest your awareness at all times in your heart. Sounds very simple, easier said than done. So here we have Hildegard. "Breathe the fragrance of the rose that springs from the thorns, radiating kindness, just waiting to be born. Feel it, remember it, return to the house of the heart. That's actually been put to music by a woman, an opera singer, Sarah Lincoln, on a CD called, can't remember what it's called. And I love the metaphor here, again, of the rose, because the thorns, the emerging from the thorns, is very much symbolic of our necessary bringing to light our shadow side, our thorns, our samskaras, our wounds, and let them be healed by the light. The rose metaphor is often used to symbolize the soul. So another of the great gifts of our H2C is sacred perception. Perceived from the heart, the whole world becomes a thou rather than an it. I love that one from Campbell. And then we have from Teilhard, nothing is so profane, nothing is profane for those who know how to see. And of course, you know, we've just been doing a practice, touching on a practice of awakening the third eye, because all this sacred perception is about awakening the third eye and that transformation of consciousness that arises with that, with our connection, inner connection. And from Jesus, the Gospel of St. Thomas, the kingdom of heaven is spread upon the earth, yet no man sees it. I could have quoted Blake, if the doors of perception are cleansed, everything would appear as it is, infinite. He also said, of course, to see the world in a grain of sand or heaven in a wildflower. Joanna Macy speaks of feeling with new eyes in our great turning. That about sums it up. Seeing with new eyes. And our perception of beauty and our creativity are both heightened by these new eyes. We have a lovely one from our friend Charles Eisenstein, who of course talks a lot about the consciousness of our transition time. And he says, when the illusion of separation is healed, we will come to define our collective purpose in terms of beauty. At its deepest heart, creativity is meant to serve and evoke beauty. And from the poet John O'Donoghue, my love, if we choose to journey on the path of truth, it then becomes a sacred duty to walk hand in hand with beauty. And he goes on, in the light of beauty, the strategies of the ego melt like a web against a candle. Just love that. In the light of beauty, the strategies of ego melt like a web against a candle. Our joy in the beautiful is as native to us as our breath. And then this sweet one from Mary Oliver. Maybe the desire to make something beautiful is the peace of God that is inside each of us. And my favorite quotation from Keats in my teenage years, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all you know in life and all you need to know. And from Brian, the urge to make things, to create things, is certainly as deep as the urge of the sun to shine and the earth to spin. Our destiny is woven into the mystery of creativity and time. It's a profound one from Brian. Sacred activism, another gift of our Holy Trinity. Another of the distinguishing qualities of the sacred, of the snowflake self emerging from our HTC, is it loves to serve. That is its raison d'etre. And of course, we know how important the spirit of service is in both Christianity and Buddhism. What has become known as sacred activism is not necessarily about banner waving, that can be worthwhile. It is about realizing your calling as a unique embodiment of the transcendent. Going back to the Dalai quote, the aim of life is to embody the transcendent. I like the analogy there of the rose window of Church Cathedral. We are each like a shard of glass. We're into beauty again here, of course. A shard of glass in that massive mandala window. We may not see the whole beauty, but we find our place where our little shard of glass is meant to be, to contribute to the whole. This is such a beautiful realization of our HTC. Yeah. From Gandhi, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Such a far cry from our modern day imperatives. And from Joanna, do what calls your heart. Effective action comes from love. It is unstoppable, and it is enough. And from Margaret Mead, a famous one, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And we can reflect from a moment of that and how important it is in our time. Because these are times we cannot turn the light on by ourselves. We are in such a, so most of the world, we have to realize, is in survival mode these days with climate change, with economic stresses, with psychic dysfunctions and so on and so forth, depression. So few of us are in such a privileged position to be able to sow the seeds of this new global consciousness, of this noosphere, embodying it, dreaming it into collective existence, helping to midwife the beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. In other words, helping to reweave the noosphere. And our sacred activism imperative is beautifully summed up for us in this favorite verse of mine from Sufi poet Rumi. You might like to close your eyes again to the poem. Let yourself be silently drawn by the stronger pull of what you really love. When you do things from your soul, a river moves through you. Freshness and a deep joy are the signs. Paradoxically, through all the pain and suffering of the world, we can discover joy in our HTC. It deepens our capacity for both love and joy and grief. This is expressed so beautifully by Joseph Campbell. It is possible to participate joyfully in the sorrows of the world, one of my favorite quotes. And then we have from the Hindu Upanishads, sacred scriptures, from joy we have come, in joy we live and have our being. And in that sacred joy, we will one day melt again. It's the essence of our true self. And from Yogananda, author of Autobiography of a Yogi, when you sit in the silence of deep meditation, joy bubbles up from within, roused by no other stimulus. That is amazing, isn't it? Causeless joy is one of the great gifts of mysticism. Last but not least, the gift of love. Compassion could become the evolutionary force which shapes life. What a profound statement from Brian Swim. Again, so different from the imperatives of our modern industrial growth society. David Suzuki actually said, the law of love is as fundamental and as universal as any other physical law. It is written everywhere we look, and it maps our intimate connection with the rest of the living world. And of course, Dalai Lama speaks of compassion as his true religion. And I love this one from the Baha'i sage, Ibn Arabi. I follow the religion of love. Whatever way love's camels take, that is my religion and my faith. And from Andrew, the catastrophe that we face is inviting us into the reign of love. I remember Rumi in one of his verses or poems or something says that wherever you are, whatever you're doing, be in love. Cultivate that feeling of in loveness, even if it's just putting the kettle on. It is a way of taking you into the HTC. And it's of course, famously from Teilhard de Chardin. Someday After we have mastered the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness the energies of love. And then for the second time in human history, we shall have discovered fire. And of course, the discovery of fire massively accelerated the evolution of Homo sapiens. So we can say love energy is needed to reweave the noosphere. So just in conclusion here, darling, almost with you. Beloveds, we are on the threshold of a quantum leap in consciousness as profound as the emergence of life on Earth. We cannot expect the great unraveling to be free of pain and grief and chaos. It is rightly said that the Earth is in her long dark night, in a rite of passage. But science has revealed to us that in deep time, cosmic evolution is not a gentle, continuous process, but punctuated by convulsive episodes of breakdown and renewal. Our great turning houses the possibility of a new species of humanity, a humanity blessed with the will and wisdom to regenerate the earth and bring forth hitherto unimaginable beauty and abundance in a noosphere. And in the inevitable time of transition, we can keep faith alive with the understanding that the evolutionary impulse of the universe, that transcendent intelligence is towards greater goodness, truth, and beauty. And it lies in the heart of each and every one of us. It is yearning to have a voice in the heart of each and every one of us. Signature is love. So we come to our final slide. On that note, I leave you with this lovely quote from the Indian poet Tagore. Faith is the bird that feels the light and sings while the dawn is still dark. Above all else, our emerging heart trinity, our consciousness, our HTC gifts, it gifts us with the resilience, courage, and compassion to move through our great unraveling with grace and with compassion for others. It enables us to feel the light and sing while the dawn is still dark.
So, amen and good night, everyone, or good day for, for our Southern Hemisphere friends.